What is going on, Steeler fans? It is Monday. That means it's time for the Monday morning conversation. I'm really excited for this conversation. It's a little bit different. We typically have beat writers on and people that know the insides and outs of the Pittsburgh Steelers. But in this case, with the NFL draft, we're only weeks away from this thing. I thought it would be great to bring on Fans First Sports Network talent who has a history of actually being a scout in the National Football League. Rodrik David joins me. Rodrik, welcome to the show. How are you?
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here. Talent might be that's certainly a word that gets thrown around, but it's great to be here. I love scouting, love football, and man, the Steelers are a good one to talk about for a lot of reasons.
So before we get started with any questions coming from me, I would love to give you an opportunity to talk about your podcast, which is on the Fans First Sports Network, and then also tell us a little bit about your history as it pertains to scouting talent evaluation for in the game of football.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with the podcast. It's called Scouting the League. Again, me, myself, and my co-host Neil Stratton, who runs a service called Inside the League. Again, I come from the scouting side. Neil primarily works on the agent side. We look at things from the scouting world. Most of our guests are former scouts, former GMs. We've had a couple, Martin Mayhew, John Robinson, former GMs that talk about, again, building a scouting staff. Going through the scouting process. We spent a couple of weeks ago we talked an hour basically about top 30 visits in local days and what all goes into those. So we get really into the weeds, really into the specifics of it. And again, I spent 6 years with the Falcons, both in the pro side and the college side. I spent a year with the Tennessee Titans. So I've been through I was in the draft room for 6 years. I've been to school visits. I've gone through free agency. I've been at the combine. So we can get into the specifics that a lot of people don't talk about, or that are, again, you kind of hear rumors and stuff like that. And we just go in depth on scouting. So if you have an interest in scouting, check it out, scoutingtheleague.com. And again, we've been doing, I think this is season 4 of one iteration or another of Scouting the League. I started back in kind of 2022 doing some scouting reports after my time with the Falcons ended. And I've been a football guy all my life. I grew up around football. My dad was a high school coach for 30 plus years. I chose graduate school based on where I could get my start with the football program, and it ended up being Ohio State, right down the road from Pittsburgh there. And then I spent a year with the Tennessee Titans, and then coached actually in Cleveland, Ohio at Case Western Reserve University for 2 years before getting my full-time shot with the Atlanta Falcons in 2016. Was a scouting assistant, did some pro scouting work for a couple of years, went to the Midwest area, basically Tennessee up to Ohio, Big Ten country, Minnesota, Iowa, again, really the central part of the country until 2021. There was this little thing called COVID-19, and I said no thank you to the vaccine that our organization mandated, and I was fired as a result. I was actually sitting in Lansing, Michigan, ready to go visit Michigan State that next day when I received my final phone call, and from there my football path changed a little bit. I work with agents primarily. I do draft prep now. I still do a ton of reports. I obviously have the podcast now, and kind of doing a number of different projects now, working on some stuff for scouts to give scouts some additional resources, and really just doing whatever I can in the football world to inform people, educate people, help people make good decisions.
All right, so I want to back up a little bit. Before we talk about your time in the National Football League, I want to go into a case you talked about, Ohio State and in Columbus. How do you get to the point where you're like, you know what? I think scouting is the direction for me. And then also, how do you even get those opportunities with, say, an NFL team? Is there some type of, I hate to use the term portal because college football has kind of really ruined that term, but how does that even work?
Yeah, it is. It is a networking business. It is when you're on the outside, which I completely was. I knew nobody in the NFL. I knew nobody in scouting. To say that it is a people business, it's a who you know business. It 100% is. My dad was a coach, and so I always saw things from the coaching side. I was around coaches. Well, when I played at a Division III school, Nebraska Wesleyan University out in Lincoln, and as a player, I was a slow, stiff white corner. Like, again, not many of us making it to the NFL. Like, I say that with, that's who I was. And as I was watching my film, the more I watch film, the more I realize, like, hey, I really enjoy breaking down this receiver or this slot receiver or the way this quarterback works in his drop. And again, the X's and O's and the game planning, the scheming, that didn't interest me as much. And so I started again, kind of make some phone calls, do some research. Hey, this person who knows this person. Do you think I could have a conversation? And through that time as a very average Division III football player, I kind of realized like scouting is the way I naturally see the game as opposed to coaching and the scheme. And again, I understand the scheme. I like the scheme. But again, it just so naturally the scouting started to happen, and I had some really fantastic advisors. I was a sport management major. I knew football in one way or another is what I wanted to do at Nebraska Wesleyan, and beyond that, and an advisor like, hey, like, I think you should go be a teacher and teach sport management. I was like, yeah, that didn't interest me. Like, okay, well then what you need to do is go to grad school where you can get plugged into a program to meet scouts. And so I applied to Ohio State, Minnesota, Louisville, Tennessee, a bunch of big sport management programs that had big time football programs that I knew 32 NFL teams were going to come through. And at that point, I knew, again, networking. You've got to meet scouts. If you want a chance to work in a scouting department, you got to meet scouts. Again, it worked out with Ohio State there. And the timing worked out funny. I actually committed, more or less to Ohio State as a GA that was going to pay for school in a different area with football. But it was like 2 weeks later, Jim Tressel gets fired, Tattoo Gate. Luke Fickell's the head coach in 2013, my first year on campus, 2011, my first year on campus. Buildings locked down, NCAA's in there. Year 2, Urban Meyer comes around, NCAA's in there, buildings locked down. So I spent about a year and a half cold calling emails. I took an undergraduate coaching football class just to get in the football building. And from there, I met some people. Mike Vrabel was the defensive line coach. He needed an intern. Met with Vrabel, hit it off with Vrabel, and basically spent the spring of 2013 in the building. Again, networking, connecting, doing anything I could, saying yes to any coach that asked for a project to be done. And then from there, had an opportunity to get down to Tennessee. Got a call about an interview on Monday, July 22nd. On the 23rd, Tuesday, I flew down to Nashville. I had a job offer on Wednesday, the 23rd, and by the afternoon, I was driving to Nashville to start a job. So it happened in the flash. And then again, the connections I made, the network I had started to build at that time. You just stay in touch, you do football work, and took a couple years before I finally ended up in Atlanta. But it was a long roundabout path.
It's good. I always love, it's almost like a redemption story, not so much from the fact that you were wronged in some way, but the fact that you grinded your way, you kind of build it yourself. You didn't rely on someone else that had that connection for you. You got those connections yourself. I love those stories. Now, you said you spent time in both the pro side and the college side in terms of scouting departments.
Yes.
In terms of the years that you spent in the league, what was the division of labor between those two entities? Like, did you spend 2 years in pro and the rest in college? Like, how did that work itself out?
Yeah. So I was hired in February of 2016 as a scouting assistant. And again, by nature of the year, again, I was doing a little bit of everything, both getting draft prep ready, but also we were getting ready for free agency. So that spring and summer, I had James Bodenheimer was the other scouting assistant. He got promoted right after the draft to Northeast Scout. So I went from learning on the fly again, for a scouting assistant, it was breakneck pace all spring. I learned from him. You do pro and college kind of as a scouting assistant, just learning the lay of the land. Well, that fall, I became really close with our special teams coach at the time, Keith Armstrong. And so during that fall of the 2016 season, I started doing special teams advances, essentially on the pro side. I was still helping manage the college side of the game. And then by the end of that year, of course, we were making a playoff run, eventually going to the Super Bowl. I kind of was tagged and I started doing some playoff advances, essentially as a pro scout. I was actually in Foxborough Stadium in January of 2017 for the Steelers Patriots AFC Championship game. Had the Steelers won that game, I would have been in charge of that advance for the Super Bowl, which obviously we know how both that game went as Steelers fans. You know how that game, and then eventually the Patriots. We know how 28-3 went for us Falcons. But shortly after the Super Bowl, kind of as free agency got going, they promoted me to pro scout. So I spent the then fall of 2017 and fall of 2018 on the pro side doing advances, free agency, managing short list workouts, all that kind of stuff. And then in the spring of 2019, we had some coaching staff shuffle, coordinators, all that kind of stuff. One of our Midwest scout, Bob Cronenberg, became the assistant offensive line coach for the Falcons, and they moved me over to the Midwest. So basically, as pro days were getting ready in 2019, they sent me out, which was a really good time, get the lay of the land. Crony had gotten all the reports done. It was just, on me to kind of get numbers, get cleaned up, figure out where to park come that fall. And then got my kind of run in Midwest. So then I spent 2019 on the road. 2020 comes, obviously we were off the road doing everything from home, doing a couple different game visits. And then 2021 up until September, I was on the Midwest on the college side as well. So kind of essentially a 2.5 year split with both pro and college. Did you prefer one over the other? It's a great question. I honestly preferred pro, to be honest. And it's one of the hardest things a college scout has to do is you are so focused for the fall season on your college area. It's tough enough managing your own team and keeping up on your own guys and evaluating and knowing what your roster looks like. You completely lose track of the other 31 teams in the NFL, which I really, really enjoyed knowing what, again, there was a time where I could probably name 1 through 53 on all 31 other rosters. And like, again, who the short list players are across the league. So I really enjoyed that aspect of having a really, really good handle on teams across the NFL. And there's a ton of value in the draft. You've got to know the draft and know how college works. But man, I really, really enjoyed pro.
So let's take the listeners and even the viewers, so those are watching on YouTube when this goes live. Talk us through. Okay, here we are. We're at the very beginning of April. What is the scouting department doing as pro days are winding down? You have those few weeks before, top 30 visits we know are a really important part of it. But what do the final preparations look like for an NFL scouting department getting ready for, I think, the biggest event that is not football related in terms of a game being played in the calendar year? So what does that look like? I know every team is probably different, but I feel like there's probably a lot of similarities across the board.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. Again, there's 32 ways plus to do. Again, there's going to be 32 ways every year, and you get a new GM. There's going to be another new way. But again, as everything winds down, again, for an area scout, regional, national, for your college scouting department, you better have 99% of your questions answered, which is really what scouting is looking for questions and answering those questions in one way or another. And most teams are going to get together for at least a week of meetings. Sometimes you'll do 2 weeks of meetings. Some teams will go a full 3 weeks where you're going to set your final college board. Most teams are going to, in terms of draftable players, you're going to have maybe 200 players who you have a quote unquote draftable grade on. And it's a matter of getting that board set. Hey, who do we like where? What are our final team grades? Again, you're going to have, as an area scout, I may like a player here. The regional may like them a little bit more. A national may like them a little less. A coach may like them in here somewhere. So again, you're sorting through, you're putting conversations on those guys. You're talking about the character fit. You may get a doctor in there, an athletic trainer, and they're talking about a medical thing that they may have. You may get a player engagement, player development, talking about, again, an issue or a relationship he has off the field. So again, you start to narrow in on probably the 20 or 30 players that, hey, as Falcons, as Steelers, as whoever my team is, we really like that. You're putting your logo on that player and say, this is a player we really like and want if they come to us in this spot. And again, that is 1 through 250, whatever it is in the NFL draft. So you're having those meetings. You may be going back and watching some film on them. Again, at that point, you're getting your background check information. You're getting your psychologists who have maybe done an interview. You're getting, on top 3-4 round guys, you're probably going to have maybe 10 reports from coaches, directors, GMs, everybody, strength and conditioning coaches. Everybody's going to get their opinion on it. And at the end of the day, by the time maybe you leave a week before the draft for a little breather or right up to draft night, you want to have that board completely set. And then from there, most teams are going to be divvying up their positions for undrafted free agent work. As the Midwest guy, I ended up looking at the edges, outside linebackers, defensive ends. Hey, we're looking at probably signing 2 of them as undrafted free agents. Go through, start again making recruiting calls, make sure your information's lined up, decide who you like to bring in, try out players, and that's divided up. And again, depending on the year, I think my first year as Midwest Scout, we signed 32 undrafted free agents, which was about double what the normal average is. I think in my last year, we were at like 12. So again, depending on where your roster is at and what everything looks like, you're getting ready for that undrafted free agent scramble on Saturday of the draft as well. But man, April's really about just getting everything right and lined up. That way, Thursday, Friday, Saturday of those draft nights, you're ready to rock and roll.
Now, I'll tell you a quick story. There's a book that I read, Jim Wexell, who's on our podcast platform. He's a beat writer. He wrote a book about Troy Polamalu, and he told a story at the very start of the book about how there was a scout who basically stood up in front of the entire front office personnel and said, this guy from USC might be a little undersized, but I will say that he is going to be a future Hall of Famer. And if you don't draft him and trade up to do so, you're going to end up regretting it. And it was this whole back and forth. And so when you read that things like that, a lot of fans are always talking about pounding the table, right?
Yeah,
like that's a phrase, like someone is pounding the table. So if there was an athlete, a football player, doesn't matter the position, whatever, and you are sitting there and you're like, you know what? Let's say you're with Atlanta. This guy is going to be a perfect Falcon. He's going to fit into the scheme that we have. And you are just hell-bent on them giving him a realistic look if he's available or potentially trading to get him. What is that look like for you as a local scout? Do you go to the regional guy and say, look, we got to get this guy up on the board more? How does that look if you are that devout and that passionate about one specific prospect?
Yeah. I mean, again, we hit on it. 32 teams are going to have different ways. And even my time in Atlanta under Thomas, when I was Thomas Dimitroff, when I was an area scout, he had been there close to 10 years at that point. He really had his way. Those first 2 years of meetings with him, we didn't have a ton of opportunity to stand on the table. You better put it in a report and, better stand on it. When Terry Fontenot came in, he really gave us, Kyle Smith really gave us the chance to, hey, who are your guys? Who are the players you like? And for an area scout, he better check all the boxes, like you said. And the thing as an area scout and even regional and national, that you get to know these guys. You probably spend some time with them at some point when you're at the school in the fall. Maybe you try to bump into them. Maybe it's at your pro day where you just get a little bit of time with them. It's a Senior Bowl interview. It's a Zoom call. It's a top 30 visit where you get to spend and interact with them a little bit, where, like, again, you just walk away. And it's one of the things I talk about with the draft prep is as a prospect, your play is always going to be on tape. But again, that person that you are, like, where a scout or a GM just walks away like, man, that's just a great dude. Like, I want him in this building. Those are the guys when the film is that, again, at 1 through 7th round player, but you love the person. This is a make it type person. Again, for me, that was Ben Skoranek out of Northwestern and Notre Dame. Again, like, what he did at the Senior Bowl, he gets hurt. He came to an interview concussed. He had a giant gash across his nose. Like, he's like, man, I actually had a Liz Frank break in my foot, but I just didn't want to tell anybody about it. And, like, again, so all this stuff we learned during interviews was exactly what we had heard about at both Northwestern and Notre Dame. He's a 7th round wide receiver that's always going to battle to make a roster. But again, if he's the 53rd player on your roster, like, that's a player you love and get excited about. So when it's guys like Ben Skoranek that it's like, man, I just want this guy, this person is what puts us over the top. Again, it's, hearing stories about Cam Hayward. That's what Cam Hayward has been for a really, really long time in Pittsburgh. Obviously, that's a future Hall of Famer that has put the tape on. But again, the person, the guy, the dude is that kind of guy too. And those are the guys that are going to be so easy for scouts to stand on the table in the next couple weeks.
As a scout and as someone that's speaking to these players in different formal, informal settings, a question that I always have is, how do you weigh character versus skill? You want them to mesh. You want them to be the same. Like you mentioned Cam Hayward, like the dude's a stand-up guy. He's been that way his whole life. Like that's a pretty easy evaluation. But then you look at a Steeler like George Pickens, talented beyond his measure, but yet sometimes there's things in between the ears that gets in the way. As a scout, how difficult is it to try to measure that fine line between those two entities, character and skill, and then try to put it into a report?
Yeah. I mean, it's incredibly difficult. And that is where the organization you're with matters so much, because we look at the franchises that take some of these rogue characters, these guys that are, again, perennially in the news for not their playing. And there's organizations that do a really good job keeping them, again, on the right track or out of enough trouble. And there's organizations that have to stay away from those players. And that one of the things is, hey, does our organization have the resources? It's the question, not of do they have issues, but as an organization, as a coaching staff, as a position coach, can we manage this person and who he is? George Pickens, perfect example. And Mike Tomlin, perfect example. Again, Mike Tomlin is, again, unparalleled in a lot of ways. Andy Reid is phenomenal at it too. Bill Belichick used to do it in his own way. You're talking Hall of Fame coaches and organizations that have the resources around these guys to, George is going to say some things we don't like, but again, at the end of the day on Sundays, is he going to line up? Is he going to tear our locker room apart? Again, having media outbursts is one thing. Hey, is he going to end up behind bars? Is he going to end up in the news for those things? Where, again, it is always the balance. And it's always the question, I think, as a scout you ask is not, does this player have issues? It's, do we have the resources to manage these issues? And for players that are really, really talented is, how much do we have to invest to make sure this player stays on the field? And again, we think about guys every year. It was Tavondre Sweat just a year or two ago that fell in the draft and the Titans took him and had a really good year, rare, talented player. And George Pickens is one of those who, again, he's always going to be in the news for his different reasons. Obviously, Tyreek Hill may be the poster child for overcoming issues he had that caused him to slide and being with organizations that found a way to at least ensure he was going to stay on the field.
Before we get to specific Steelers talk, I want to ask you a very simple question that I'm just curious about. As someone that's within the front office, department scouting, whether it's pro, college, whatever, what does watching the draft unfold look like for you? Meaning, are you in a room with a bunch of other scouts? Are you in with, the main room with the GM, the coach, the owners probably popping in and out? I'm sure we all see those videos now of draft night, when a player gets selected and everyone's clapping. What does that look like for you? How did you watch the NFL draft unfold for those 3 days?
Yeah. We were in the room. We had, again, called the draft room. Easy enough. Even when it wasn't draft time, it was the draft room. It was your meeting room. It was your big room where, again, your college board, your pro boards were going up. We used to have 2 TVs. One was tuned to ESPN draft coverage. One was NFL network draft coverage. They were muted, if not turned way down. GM, owner, head coach, executive, whoever was at that front table. Again, it was all running through there. It was an incredibly, again, you talk about a 3 or 4 hour draft, some of the most intense. Again, it is dead quiet. You get a little excited. Again, it's the fear and anticipation of, hey, if they come over and ask me a question about this prospect, I better be ready to go with every answer if this is my guy. I've been doing work for a year plus on this player. Again, you've probably got a pro table. You've got your salary cap guy, your your analytics people. Again, in Atlanta, we used to have a few minority owners that would come hang out for day one, day two, just kind of watch. Arthur Blank's family used to come in for part of it and watch. And we were that college scouts were all at one table together. You're maybe texting, you're on some group chats, doing some different stuff, but really you're just kind of watching things unfold. You're again, maybe depending on your relationship, you texting back and forth with people across the league that you know. And as we typically get the picks, we've got a pick tracker that the NFL sends out. We're typically 5 to 10 minutes ahead of what's going to be on TV. And then when as your pick is approaching, they pulled a little cover off the camera in the corner of your draft room, which is always the popular video that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then again, everybody, it's time to button up. You always look for the 2 or 3 people that want to be in front of the camera, and the 2 or 3 people that go and hide in the corner because they don't want to be on camera. And then again, you're really just listening and waiting as your pick gets closer and the GM gets ready to pull that card.
Are you privy to what the GM is thinking, the head coach? Like, is everyone privy to what's going on? Meaning you're watching the board unfold, phones ringing, maybe they're talking trade up, trade down, whatever the case is. Are you just watching, like thinking like, I don't know what they're talking about, or is this common knowledge amongst the entire draft room?
Yeah, in the draft room, most of the time they're going to give you an idea of what's going on. Again, both Thomas and Terry, they would say, hey, that was, he gets off the phone. He's like, wow, he's not going to give you the specifics, but so-and-so wants, talking about our pick right here. Like, hey, no, they'll tell you we're going to stay, or again, turn into maybe usually it's your cap guy that's going to be running your trade scenarios and who wins the trade scenario, who loses. Every team has their little calculations for a 4th round pick at this slot means this. And again, and then obviously you're watching your draft board, every magnet, every card's coming off. And so when that player that you've been talking about for 2-3 months at this point still up there, it's like, man, we've got a chance to get our guy. And then the superstition starts to come. It's like, hey, we can't say his name. We can't say his school. And again, you get that where everybody, the player you really, really want is sitting there. And then you're just, you're looking at the needs board that the pro department put together. It's like, all right, the 2 teams in front of us don't need that position, but that also means somebody else that needs that position could be calling them. So you don't know what's going on their room. So you're certainly privy to what's going on, but you're never going to know the full scope unless you're the GM.
Man, that's crazy. I'd love to be a fly on the wall just once. I don't need to say anything. I just want to sit there and I just want to see how like you talked about it being quiet. I bet that would be like a deafening silence. Like you're just waiting. You're waiting with bated breath. And if you're patient as a general manager, and you're like, we think this guy's going to fall. And then he gets to you, like, and then it's just pure elation. I think that would be fantastic. I think it'd be a great event. But I do want to ask you, throughout your time in the league, what did you learn, if anything at all, about the Pittsburgh Steelers and the way they do things? Is it different? Have you ever talked to scouts? And what do they say about the Pittsburgh Steelers when you're out there?
Yeah, the Steelers, again, have been a model for other franchises on the way they do things for a long time. Kevin Colbert did a phenomenal job in his time there. And it was always interesting because as much as everybody wanted to follow and copy to a certain extent, the Steelers were an incredibly guarded, and even scouts that I was on the road with that I tried to get to know, they weren't interested in relationships the way some other scouts, very social, very, hey, I want to get to know everybody on the road. Not as a negative. They just, again, they were head down grinders doing their thing. And that is always, again, from any aspect, scouts to scouts, agents to scouts on the Steelers, they were, a lot of times it was really hard to crack and get any information, kind of know what they're thinking and have any conversations with, which again, that is maybe philosophy, maybe the way they're brought up, maybe the culture, maybe any number of things, not a negative. Again, it can be one of those things that's really frustrating when, again, for me on the outside now is I didn't have great Steelers relationships. But that doesn't, again, they are a model, obviously now with Mr. Khan as the new GM, and kind of you're getting the Steelers changing a little bit. Obviously you still have the head coach in place, which is a big part of it. You've got maybe the most stable ownership, a phenomenal ownership group. Again, a franchise that does things really the right way, patient and all those things, always in contention. But the Steelers have been and continue to be a model for other scouting departments to model theirs off of within whatever information they can grab.
All right, last question before I let you go. I wrote an article on Sunday for SteelCurtainNetwork.com, and it was essentially about how I feel like the NFL draft prep space is very polarizing, and everyone's thoughts on a prospect. I mean, look at Shedeur Sanders as a prime example. Some people have him as a top 5 pick, and some people have him almost sliding to the second round. Like, it is really crazy, and it just depends on who you trust, or if you have your own thoughts, how did you develop those thoughts? As a scout, like, did you all ever look at anything that the national media was putting out there, or did you all just trust your own instincts, or did you just make fun of those people like Mel Kiper Jr.? I'm just curious how you all handled
Yeah.
all the noise that surrounds this huge event.
Yeah. The short answer is no. We paid zero attention.
That's a good thing.
Again, I can go back to my scouting assistant days. It was a scouting assistant project. We had to put, I think it was at the time, it was the 8 most common mock drafts that was sent to our owner and minority owners. And again, averages, who are players to watch, it's all being tracked. The pro department, and for most places, tracking visits. You're going to pay attention to all that stuff. And again, for the news and media sources, they're a piece of information in that way. But again, like I said, a prospect that's going to be drafted is going to have probably a minimum, even the 7th round is going to have a minimum of 6 reports on them. We're going to trust our own reports. We do not care about nor value in any way what anybody on the outside of our building is saying about this player. And the biggest piece that we've spent some time talking about character. It's like, again, the really good analysts out there may have a tidbit of character information, but they don't know the full story, which affects so much. And again, for a player, quarterbacks, you take them out of the equation because the position, they quarterbacks truly need a different grading system than the rest of the players in the draft. But again, anybody outside of an NFL building has just a fraction of the information that they need to truly slot where that player is going to go. And then you learn who's doing stuff for click value, who's doing stuff for shock value, who's doing stuff. And Mel Kiper's been doing a long time. You understand why Mel is doing some of the stuff. Todd McShay, Jordan Reed, Dane Bro, like all these analysts that they do watch film, they can evaluate, but again, they do it from a 10,000 foot perspective. And again, they're relying on different things than teams in the building are. So scouts aren't paying any attention to what you're putting out there. And that's always a frustrating part of the year when the owner calls you. Hey, the GM I remember different times the GM walks in and says, hey, so-and-so just told me this, like, what's up with that? And again, I can tell you where you read it from because I read the tweet 2 minutes ago too. Like, that's why he's asking about it. It's not true. It's true in this degree. And it's just part of the process is the media, which is good for football. Where it's coming from though.
That's a great cautionary tale for all the fans out there listening to not put too much stock into those mock drafts that you see leading up to the NFL draft. But Rodrik, I really do thank you for your time. And I want to give you an opportunity to not just plug the podcast again. I know we talked about it at the top of the show, but anything else that you want to plug, I want to give you the opportunity to do that now.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, go follow me at Right Step ADV. Check out our podcast. Again, it comes out every Wednesday, late morning. YouTube, Fans for Sports Network, of course, Apple Podcast, wherever you can find your podcast. Scouting the League. Again, I think we have the GM of a Group of 5 program on this week. Go back, listen to John Robinson, former GM of the Tennessee Titans. We had Martin Mayhew, former GM of a couple different franchises, on last couple of weeks. Again, if you are curious about what scouting in the NFL is actually like, go through our archives. My website, rsafootball.com, Right Step Advising. Again, go check everything out. Bio. I'm open. If you have questions, hit me up. I love talking ball. I'm an open book on scouting, so go check those things out. And I'll look forward to seeing what the Steelers do, because again, they're a fun one, and we didn't even get into draft needs and what the roster looks like. So it's a good roster that in a tough division. So you better improve. Every team better improve.
Absolutely. And I probably will be calling on you again to be on the show, maybe after the draft, to take a look at the process, what exactly went down, who they selected, and what your thoughts are. But I thank you very much for taking the time, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Great being on.